She has completely ruined the entertainment value when it comes to watching Caitlin Clark. As you see, that Washington Mystics game was half empty. You see the attendance dropping at all the Indiana Fever games, and she just completely downplayed it. She has no care about the fact that she completely ruined this offense. This Indiana Fever team scored 78 points. We were scoring 100 a night before Stephanie White got over here and completely ruined it. And a lot of people are not happy with the fact that she was crediting Kelsey Mitchell way.
Caitlin Clark steps into another night where the entire arena bends around her gravity, and Stephanie White stands at the center of a storm that refuses to fade. Caitlin Clark, the most disruptive rookie force in modern women's basketball, walks into a narrative where every possession feels like a referendum on coaching, philosophy, and identity. Stephanie White, tasked with controlling structure around Caitlin Clark, is suddenly fighting something bigger than schemes. She's fighting expectation itself. Caitlin Clark changes arenas before she even touches the ball. Caitlin Clark turns empty seats into headlines and crowded arenas into pressure cookers. Yet in this moment, the conversation shifts away from Caitlin Clark's deep threes and late-game poise and toward Stephanie White's handling of the system built around her. Attendance debates, offensive rhythm debates, and viewer experience arguments all orbit Caitlin Clark as the Fever's entire ecosystem feels unstable. Caitlin Clark doesn't just represent scoring. Caitlin Clark represents entertainment, urgency, and pace. When Caitlin Clark is slowed down, the entire Indiana Fever identity feels like it loses oxygen. That tension sits at the center of the storm between Caitlin Clark's supporters and Stephanie White's coaching philosophy. The conflict around Caitlin Clark intensifies when Stephanie White addresses fans and expectations head-on. Caitlin Clark's supporters see a generational offensive engine being restricted, while Stephanie White frames everything around structure, discipline, and winning habits.
Just all the fans that Caitlin Clark brought, which is why everybody's getting paid more money. You don't care about the fact that you are ruining the viewer experience? Take a listen to this.
Here in the back. So when my neighbor comes up to me and tells me that he's so frustrated, he's yelling at the TV because he wants Caitlin to shoot more. And you see social media, of course you do, and we all do. And we see frustration if Caitlin doesn't have the ball, or if something goes wrong, or if the team doesn't play well in the fourth quarter, all those things that happen.
Caitlin Clark becomes the focal point of a growing philosophical war inside the Indiana Fever system. Caitlin Clark's presence brought global attention, record-breaking viewership, and sold-out environments, yet Stephanie White's approach prioritizes control over chaos. Caitlin Clark thrives in chaos, pull-up threes, transition bursts, and rapid reads, while Stephanie White emphasizes half-court execution and rotational balance. Caitlin Clark's impact forces defenses to stretch beyond traditional spacing rules. Caitlin Clark draws double teams at distances most guards never even attempt to shoot from. But Stephanie White's system demands pauses, resets, and structured ball movement that often slows Caitlin Clark's natural rhythm. Caitlin Clark fans interpret every bench rotation and offensive stagnation as a disruption of momentum. Stephanie White interprets it as game management. That divide becomes the core tension. Caitlin Clark's explosive identity versus Stephanie White's controlled framework. Caitlin Clark's influence on the Indiana Fever is undeniable, but so is the resistance to fully centering a system around Caitlin Clark's pace. That friction becomes visible in scoring drops, possession delays, and the emotional reaction of fans who came to see Caitlin Clark operate at full speed. Caitlin Clark's late-game brilliance becomes the defining contradiction of the entire narrative. When Caitlin Clark takes over, the system looks unstoppable. But when Caitlin Clark is pulled in and out of rhythm, the offense looks fragmented.
Simple as that. Lexi Hall barely getting minutes now. You come over here and mess the whole thing up. Now, we got to get to what Stephanie White had to say after the game, where it appears she was trying to give a lot of Caitlin Clark's game-winning heroics and things like that. She was trying to pass some of this credit to Kelsey Mitchell. I don't understand why. I don't understand why you don't know how to handle these post-game pressers. Let's take a look.
Caitlin Clark's chemistry with Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell has already shown elite flashes in transition spacing. Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston in pick-and-roll situations create defensive panic because Caitlin Clark's range forces defenders to guard 30 feet from the rim, opening driving lanes that traditional offenses never generate. But Stephanie White's rotation structure repeatedly interrupts Caitlin Clark's flow. Caitlin Clark sits during key stretches, Caitlin Clark returns into cold possessions, and Caitlin Clark is forced to rebuild rhythm under pressure rather than sustain it. Historically, players with Caitlin Clark's shooting gravity don't operate inside conservative systems. Caitlin Clark resembles a hybrid of Steph Curry-era spacing gravity and early career, green light, offensive freedom systems where rhythm is everything. Caitlin Clark doesn't just score, Caitlin Clark warps defensive geometry. Yet coaching decisions around Caitlin Clark prioritize structure over acceleration. That creates visible tension. Caitlin Clark produces explosive stretches, but the system around Caitlin Clark struggles to sustain those explosions across full quarters. Even when Caitlin Clark delivers under pressure, the conversation shifts toward redistribution of credit, where Caitlin Clark's brilliance is often framed alongside role-player execution instead of being the central engine. Caitlin Clark's presence reshapes not only gameplay, but the entire financial and cultural identity of the Indiana Fever. Caitlin Clark drives attendance, broadcasting numbers, sponsorship attention, and arena demand that few athletes in women's basketball history can replicate.
I don't know that the noise is ever going to be quiet. This is what Caitlin does. She makes big shots and she has big moments, and I think when you have a player like her, it's very easy for people to just take it for granted and to think that everything that she does is always going to be.
You the one taking it for granted. You the one not using her right. You the one fumbling the most generational player to ever step foot in this league.
Caitlin Clark creates an environment where every coaching decision is magnified. Caitlin Clark's performance doesn't just affect wins, it affects revenue, engagement, and league-wide visibility. When Caitlin Clark is thriving, the league feels elevated. When Caitlin Clark is constrained, the conversation shifts toward missed opportunity. Caitlin Clark's relationship with Kelsey Mitchell becomes another focal point, as late-game execution often rotates through Caitlin Clark's playmaking gravity. Caitlin Clark collapsing defenses allows Kelsey Mitchell to operate in cleaner lanes, yet credit distribution becomes a point of friction in the broader narrative. Caitlin Clark's brand power now sits at the intersection of sport and entertainment economics. Caitlin Clark is no longer just a rookie guard. Caitlin Clark is a league-altering force whose usage patterns directly influence viewer experience. Caitlin Clark's future under Stephanie White's system becomes the central question. Will Caitlin Clark be fully unleashed as a tempo-driving offensive centerpiece? Or will Caitlin Clark continue navigating a structured system still trying to find equilibrium between winning basketball and must-watch entertainment? Caitlin Clark stands at the center of the most polarizing basketball conversation in the league, where every possession becomes a debate about freedom versus structure. Stephanie White's coaching identity and Caitlin Clark's generational offensive instincts continue to collide in real time, while Kelsey Mitchell's late-game execution adds another layer to an already complex system. Caitlin Clark changes arenas, changes ratings, and changes expectations, but the system around Caitlin Clark is still evolving in response. The question now is whether Caitlin Clark can deliver moments. Caitlin Clark already does that consistently. The question is whether the system built around Caitlin Clark can fully match the speed, gravity, and chaos she naturally creates. When Caitlin Clark takes the next game-winning shot, will the story still be about structure, or will it finally become entirely about Caitlin Clark's era of dominance? What do you think? Should Caitlin Clark's system be built around control or full offensive freedom?